What college major would you recommend for a high schooler's future job prospects?
Welcome to the Mind Money Spectrum podcast, where your hosts, Aaron Agti and Trishul Patel, go beyond traditional finance questions to help you explore how to use your money to achieve the freedom you want in life.
Hi, my name is Aaron Agti. I'm a financial advisor in the Bay Area. I'm here with Trishul Patel, a wealth manager on the East Coast.
Hey, Aaron, great to be here today. And thanks, everybody, for listening and watching.
Great to be here as well. So, my oldest daughter is now in high school. And one of the things my wife and I have been talking about, just kind of for us, is like what math classes to take as she plans out which math classes she'll take each year. Should she take one over the summer, et cetera, et cetera. And we also talk about just starting to have conversations with her about college. The idea of different majors, what colleges to apply to. And one of the things my wife and I don't want to say we get stuck on, but it's not an easy recommendation for us, is what would be a good major. Now we're trying to find a combination of her interests and also like what major might help her in a future career. For context, I have math and philosophy degrees. My wife is an engineer, and we talk to other people, other friends from different professions, and we tend to get a general theme of the doctors say like, oh, you shouldn't go into medicine. The engineers say, you don't want to be an engineer. Like the AI is going to like take over too much. When we're trying to like guess what the next few decades will look like in terms of careers. So I think that's what I want to kind of talk about today is not necessarily what major we would recommend for our high schooler, but that idea of what do future job prospects look like? And I tend to be the very, very optimistic one in the family. There's a ongoing joke that I have the rose-colored glasses. And so I bring up things like the how ATMs did not put bank tellers out of work. It actually increased both the number of tellers and their pay as the services the tellers offered increased in value. And there's other examples of we can't predict what future careers will include. And so is it just like, hey, just build skills and interests and like you'll figure it out? Because that's what being in your 20s is for. Like it's to figure out what you're going to do with your life kind of thing. And even then we don't really get very far. The closest I think we've come, and I don't want to say it's like an agreement, but the closest thing, we think about like service industry. So you and I are both in financial services. We provide services to other people, and it's again high level, highly educated services. Like lawyer might be in there, like legal services. We've also talked about like psychology, but not for being a psychologist, like not going into being a doctor or a therapist, but understanding just how the human brain works and how that could apply to sales strategy and marketing and advertisements and just general capitalism. And the one thing we kind of agree on is you want to be a business owner. And it kind of like, it almost doesn't matter what the business is, but our guess based on where we are, where the United States is at right now, kind of our guess of future projections of current society. And this is related to some of the conversations you and I have about how wages will never increase. That, yeah, you probably want to be on the business owner side. And therefore, You want to understand all the like how to build a business and the marketing, sales, how to create a product or service that people will pay for, and how to distribute that good or service. And you start to get into economics, like maybe economics, maybe business, like maybe going to like psychology, business school. Like again, my daughter's a freshman, so like we're not trying to plan her life for her, but it's the conversations my wife and I have on walks as we think about trying to provide advice to her that we got no idea what we're doing. So like, I really want to have this conversation because a lot of what you and I talk about ends up coming up. And so my first question to you is like, if you had a high schooler, do you have thoughts on what you'd recommend for either a college major or a potential career?
Yeah,
Kind of idea.
that's a tough one, Aaron. I don't have a high schooler. So for our listeners, my daughter is like 8, so she's second grade. He's quite a ways off of that. But it is a tough question. I've even asked myself this, more and more often, just because of, like we said, all the dramatic changes going on in the workplace and with education. But even before, the AI stuff, like one thing I noticed, I maybe mentioned this in one of our earlier episodes, like way back, is when you go to take on a career or a degree with higher education, there's a lot of opportunity cost there. You're literally saying, I'm going to forego 4 years of employment, right? And you're going to literally take on debt for 4 years. So hopefully once you come out, you can come out ahead and then catch up, repay the debt, and then accelerate where you would have been otherwise, right? That's the hope.
Okay, so I'm hoping we don't devolve into that conversation of is college worth it or not. Okay. We're saying that we have saved up money and my daughter is going to college. Don't know where, don't know like what she's going to study, but like that's the premise for today's conversation, if you're willing to grant that.
Well, I was going to actually say maybe it should be, what career should you think about? And does college even fit in that picture? Like, why would college have to be required?
Okay. So I think
why
that
is
like
it necessary? That's
do
where
you think you need college to be a lawyer?
Yes.
Okay.
Quid pro quo. So do you think you need college to be a business owner? That's the main premise of your...
No.
Yeah.
Right. But my guess, my opinion, is that the higher level services will come with education.
Okay, so a few things. The point I was actually going forward with, or trying to make, is when you decide on what you want to do and you want to earn a living from that, notion of what you want to do, it has to come down to what marketable skill can you provide that will be useful, right? That it has to come down to the notion of, can you do anything that somebody's willing to pay for at some level, whether it's a product, your time, whatever it happens to be?
Yes. So again, I think if you come up with a good,
yeah,
and you're able to sell that good,
right,
like a physical item,
yeah,
then college maybe not be worth it. But it also depends on the technology that goes into that good.
Yeah. Well, the other point I was trying to make is, I remember, so my alma mater is Cornell, private school, and when I started planning for other clients, we're planning for private school, and sometimes we put in fees and all-in costs for like a 4-year education. And you and I have talked about this.
Mhm.
ends up being in, future dollars for a kid born today, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even in present value terms, like 1 or 200,000
Yeah.
is quite sensible. And then the notion is, well, okay, let's say you just do pick a major. It'd be helpful to understand, well, what are the career prospects of that major? What is the average starting
Mhm.
salary for somebody who declares that major 4 years out?
Mhm.
And the point I wanted to make is, I was astonished to find that there were many starting salaries out of my alma mater, based on the data they were putting out, that were far below what you could get if you did not go down that path and have that much debt along with it.
Okay.
So, just to put some numbers, like there were some starting salaries in the art space of like 40, 50,000 a year.
Mhm.
And that's kind of tough to bite if, you have a couple 100,000 of debt and you want to accelerate past somebody who started working the moment they graduated and has built up 4 years of skills in the marketplace.
So one kind of quick caveat, like when you say build up debt, it's the same function as we have saved in advance. So there's not student debt, but we have assets that could go to something else and instead of going to college. So
Yeah,
for
there's
today's
still an
conversation,
opportunity cost.
student loans versus savings in advance is still same opportunity cost.
Yeah. The apples to apples comparison is, well, okay, they could spend that 200 grand that you've saved up on student loan, or, on education, or they
Yeah.
could use that to get a head start in the real world somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It could be a down payment on a house, could actually be funding business. So
Yeah, and just one more small point.
Sure.
So if you're in high school, you have to think 8 years out, right? Because let's say you're a freshman, 8 years
Mhm.
out after you graduate from college, what's going to be marketable, right? How much value is the industry going to place on the skill that you decide 4 years from now?
So I
And
think part of my I don't want to say my premise, but my next step is I'm not sure we can actually make that prediction with any kind of clarity, both in terms of the future economy, but also in terms of that individual and their life path they want to go down.
I'm going to push back on that a bit. I think even before the AI stuff, data is there to provide some guidance, right? If history is to be some guide here. For example, we know that, like I just said, some starting salaries are going to put you in a very hard financial position.
So let's say my daughter is much more likely to pursue a Bachelor of Science,
Yeah, right.
rather than BA.
Yeah.
She so far has shown to be pretty good at math. So I say if she develops interests in physics, chemistry, biology, engineering, like one
Yeah.
of those stems, we think that it could be a reasonable salary path. So it's more the question, like, do you think engineering is still as lucrative a decade from now
Yeah.
as it was the last 5 years?
Yeah. So my point is, let's say pre-AI, yeah, there's some understanding that those majors would have provided a substantial economic benefit over other majors. I just asked ChatGPT to list out the 10 best and 10 worst, or 10 highest and 10 lowest compensated majors. So, for example, a chemical engineering degree or a computer engineering degree starting salary 80 grand, right?
Okay.
What do we have here? A liberal arts degree, about 40 grand, half,
Okay.
right? That's roughly what we were mentioning. And it's important to know that if you do go down the liberal arts path, you're going to have a lot of friction, right? To overcome that opportunity cost of the education, right? Whether it's funded by parents or whether you took out loans, either way, it's still there. And now the trickier concern, Aaron, which is where this conversation shifts, is, well, we're maybe learning is these top 10 notions that of chemical engineering, computer science, electrical engineering, they may not they may not be on the top 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
8 years from now. That's the big concern. It's much harder to predict. But I think the fundamental question still has to kind of be there. How can you add value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this does come back to our high level notion that you put forward, the proposition that maybe it is the business owner. I'd like to broaden that space to encompass just this notion of being self-employed, meaning
Yeah.
you're your own boss, whether you have employees or not.
I'd actually be willing to broaden it further, where if you were in a business development role, whether you're self-employed, so if you're on the sales/marketing, but you are generating revenue at some level for yourself, for a small firm, for a big firm, I think that's probably the more valuable skill.
Potentially, but you did highlight something that I really think is important. You had mentioned that, as a business owner and as somebody who's self-employed, I'd like to throw in, you're not only responsible for that core role of owning a business, but you're responsible for all these other aspects of a business, right? Or of being self-employed.
Yes.
The accounting, the books and records, the managing the people, the whatever, all the little things. And I think that's important to highlight in terms of marketable skill. The fact
I
that
agree.
you are able to cross these different domains and pull things together. I think that's where the value is going to come from, is my high level point. And
Okay.
here's why. Here's why. I think, frankly, if you go back a couple hundred years, I'd say we were all self-employed.
Yeah.
Right. I think this was almost like the natural state of things where, hey, you're responsible for everything, including your food, your shelter, your homestead. And you had maybe a specialization, but that's like you're a smith or you're a brew or a cobbler or whatever you happen to be.
Okay. So do you think that there were more smiths, or were there more apprentices?
Well, here we go. Okay. So
and like, did you own the pub?
Yeah.
Like, there's probably one owner and multiple employees of the pub.
Okay, so a few things. I think before, most people were in agriculture, right? Like 80% farmers at some level. Meaning you're self-employed, you're subsistence farming, right? You're getting food, you're having your homestead, you're fixing your roof, you're doing whatever it takes to keep your home going. I think that was the status quo. And what that meant, though, is
the apprentice, like, your dad's the smith, so that's what you're learning how to be.
Well, I was going to get to that, right? So yeah, so the way you learn on the farm is it's a family farm. Everybody helps, right? And everybody chips in, and you learn on the job per se, but you don't get paid. You just work for your homestead, essentially. And I think what that meant is, naturally, humans or households knew how to handle all these various domains of their life, meaning they knew how to handle if small things happen, how to fix their clothes, small medical things, right? All how to grow their own food, right? And how to decide what food is good and bad, and how to take care of their rudimentary machinery or tools or whatever they happen to have, right? So I think this sense of entrepreneurship isn't more innate than we want to let on, is my point.
Okay.
And I think with the Industrial Revolution, a lot of that has gone away.
Okay.
And what I think it has meant is it has helped fueled a lot of economic growth, GDP and all that. But I think it's left a lot of us with far less skills across these various domains that we once had. Is my higher point. And but
do you know how to fix anything on your car?
I'm not as good as I should be, right? But I'm learning now. I have more free time to do so. So I instead of going straight to the mechanic, I go to Pep Boys or the AutoZone or
AutoZone,
whatever, and I work with them to try to, do the small things. But again, I before you knew every little bit of your tractor, right? Or whatever, like out of my domain here, your plow or your animals, right? You knew all the things that you needed to know about your livestock and whatever it took to grow your food. So I guess what I'm saying is that changed with the Industrial Revolution because now everybody became employees, right? Or the status quo was to be a cog in a big machine.
Yeah.
And the encouragement was, don't worry about anything else except for your little spot on the assembly line. We'll handle everything, right? We'll handle your pension, your healthcare, your food decisions. Here's a little food pyramid. Stick with that. You get your fast food meals, right? You get everything prepackaged. And all you have to do is just show up for 35 hours, call it 40, work your overtime, 2 jobs, husband and wife, and everything will be fine, right? So I think the transition now is maybe we need to pull back and go back to those entrepreneurial roots where we are more independent. We do know more of these domains and we can be our own self-employed individuals. And I think that flexibility will allow us the ability to provide more value into the system than having a very specialized type of role.
Okay. Again, I think in general, I agree with all of that. My daughter's still going to college. Okay. She's going to college. And a big part for me and my wife specifically is all of our friends as adults are from college. There was a difference between developing friends in high school because they just live near you and developing friends in college because we have the same interests and point of view, and there's so many more people that we can choose our friends. And so we have deeper relationships with our friends from college than we do those in high school. There's networking benefits where I now know a couple doctors, a couple lawyers, and like one of the guys does real estate. He found an apartment complex that some other people he knew were investing, and so several of us pooled it was like $10,000 each. One of the guys was a lawyer. He came up with the LLC draft documents, and so now I own like a couple percent of an apartment complex, and I gave my opinion on it, but my friends had the network to do all the work, kind of thing. And I think that kind of networking does still play out today. Like at every level, there's trust across businesses for those who have a personal connection first. And I don't know if that part is going away. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's that kind of classic idea. And I think there's still a lot of value in generating that network through college. Now, again, your question is like, is that worth $200,000? Like, maybe not, but I'm giving you the premise. My daughter's going to college. Yep. We have other reasons beyond her major of why we think that will help her life.
Yeah. I agree. Like, okay, so let's agree that whether you go to college or not, I think our premise is the same, that I guess what I'm saying is whether you go to college or not, choose a path that leads to more, a greater sense of entrepreneurship and self-employment.
I agree with that as well. And that's why I say the closest we come up is like, be a business owner. I don't care what it is. If you're going to be a lawyer, be a partner in the law firm that owns the law firm. if you're going to be a financial advisor, own the firm.
Now, here's my qualification to that. So my concern is, before the mantra was specialize, right? Specialize as much as you possibly can. And that's like the Adam Smith Wealth of Nations notion, where if we all specialize, then we can all increase our collective economic output because we're adding the most value we personally can into the system. I think things are changing with respect to that notion, because the concern now, and we highlighted this at the beginning of this conversation, is if you do specialize in one of these fields, any of these top 10, it could be vastly different. And those specialization skills that you poured your heart into and all of that concentration into could be so obsolete that that set of specialization skills will not provide the amount of value that you're hoping for. And specifically, because you're specializing, you're focusing less on generalization skills, right? Skills that can generalize across domains.
I kind of agree. I think this is actually worth unpacking. I genuinely believe financial advisors as a career will not die due to AI. In a large part because being a good financial advisor is not the math of investments. It's not the math of financial planning. It's helping people who do not feel comfortable with money feel comfortable with their life. Like we there's a little bit of education, a little bit of just communication. What are your concerns? What are your fears? What are the risks that you feel comfortable with? What are the risks you don't feel comfortable with? Which ones do we mitigate? Which ones do we insure? Which ones do we remove completely? What are the trade-offs for that? Like, it's helping another human being. And I think that part, whatever the like good or service that you're going to sell or provide via your business, it's less like has to help another human being. And it's like one of those I still like capitalism.
Yeah.
Kind of, you still have to create something that other people want. And it actually gets back to my wonder, like, would psychology actually be a good major where understanding how other humans think comes into play?
Well, okay, so I think there's going to be a bit of a divide here in how this plays out. And this might apply to many fields, but I'll put the analogy with computer science, which is my major in undergrad and master's. What I've noticed is I'm a better computer scientist today because I had that degree, right? And I've had some experience in computer science that when I use AI, I have like a jump start. I know what tools to use. And frankly, I feel like it's enhanced my ability to be a programmer by a good amount. For a new graduate in computer science, the tricky part is I feel like it's going to be hard for a new graduate to even get a job, because what a lot of firms are realizing is that entry level of programming skills can be easily slurped up by the AI today. It's hard to add value at the entry level. So the people who are above the entry level, they get propelled higher up in their ability to code. But the people who haven't made that jump yet to entry level are going to find it harder to jump into the mix. And currently that level is, right above around entry level. But in 8 years, you can imagine to add value, you got to be above that AI curve. Now, how is an entry level grad going to be above a curve that's accelerating away from them? When will they ever get the skill to provide value?
That's a great example, because I wonder about that for everything. Like every entry level job can.
That's my concern. So let's say you specialize to be that lawyer, right?
Okay.
And you get all the skills to be an entry level lawyer. Whoops.
Well, okay. So yes, it's this This is really hard. It's like there's a difference between, do you think lawyers go away? As in, it's actually I forget what the economics terms of it, but it's government regulation requirements that maintain that profession, kind of thing. That's different than just, can AI be your lawyer versus is AI allowed to be your lawyer?
Mm-hmm.
And my guess is that the government will be slower in accepting AI as lawyer. It's going to require still a person sitting in front of the Supreme Court and being liable for their responses. Like there's certain requirements that they have to do to be a lawyer, to appear in front of the Supreme Court justices. And I think Supreme Court justice is going to be a job for decades, much for the rest of my life, is my guess. Supreme Court justice is a job for the rest of my life. Okay. And so that's one category of like government required things. Okay. The other category I do think is that, do companies, like, are they self-aware enough as a organization that they don't need entry level, they can use AI, but in 5 years they need people with 5 years experience to be able to judge, is the AI path good or bad? We just need a common sense double check kind of thing. We can't have a wholesale trust of the outputs of this black box. It'll do 90% of the work. We need a 5% input, 5% output, but it'll do 90% of the work kind of thing. And I have no idea if companies will invest in the experience, I guess I say. But I think I think, and then I guess the other category part of that self-employed idea is, if you want to create a new good, one of the cool things that I have are electric hand warmers. I love them. Give them a client gift. There's technology in that I do not understand because I don't have any kind of engineering background. And I think some of those future goods still require technical knowledge to create in the first place. And so similarly, do you think it makes sense that to have a certified financial planner designation requires you to have a bachelor's degree?
Okay, a bunch of things there. So
okay, first I want you to answer that one question.
You mean for today or for 8 years from now?
I'll accept the 8 years from now. Do you think it makes sense that to have a CFP designation, you have to have a bachelor's degree 8 years from now?
Help me out here a bit. Is that a requirement today? I don't even know.
It is. Okay. There are some CFPs that are old enough that they got their CFP 20 or 30 years ago before as a requirement, but it is now. You have to have a bachelor's degree to have a CFP designation.
Okay, I'm going to say no, and here's why.
Okay, I'll like to explain why. Go ahead, because I say I'm a pretty hard yes, but go on.
Okay. What I'm hoping can happen with the AI revolution is a tear down of bureaucracy that's unnecessary. And
I don't think trust will be there in 8 years.
Well, it's a hope, and let me paint a vision. Okay, so there is some sense that the regulations that we put in, they end up compounding and adding an economic burden to the whole system. And over time, some of those regulations become superfluous. For example, I have a good one, right? Recently, a lot of state-regulated states that regulate advisors. So just a little bit of information. So if you're a smaller advisor, you're regulated at the state level, and each state has their own rules.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really annoying because now there's 50 sets of rules, right, that need to be followed. And it can be all slightly different. So you can imagine this just makes things a lot harder. If you're a bigger company, you get to follow the SEC federal level rules. Or if you're a smaller guy, you got to navigate among these 50, depending on which subset of the 50 states you have clients in, with caveats, because it's all annoying. Okay. Now, recently, if you're a CFP, you have continuing education requirements. So we need to take like 40 or so hours or whatever it happens to be.
60 hours every 2 years.
Yeah, 30 hours a year, whatever it happens to be. Now, the state regulators you're not required to be a CFP to be a financial advisor regulated at the state level, but it is nice to have. Now, the state regulations, if you're a state regulated advisor, in the past, you never really had a CE requirement, and now they're starting to throw it in.
Okay.
Oh, that sounds great. But now if you have a CFP, you're already doing CE, but now you got to do this other CE just to pass the state regulation requirement. My point is, if you already have a CE, why are you doing these other CE hours, which may or may not overlap? Why can't the state just say, hey, you have a CFP. We know you're already doing 30 hours. Why do you need to do 12 that we need to check? And by adding that small check into the system, now you added this entire level of bureaucracy where you need to hire people, you need to collect these statements from everybody. You're adding hours of work into the system for many cases where it's not really going to help the end client, because they're already doing the hours if you're a CFP.
Okay, I'll say I'm more afraid of going like too down a rabbit hole, but like the small distinction is the Certified Financial Planning Board is a self-regulatory body with no punitive powers. The only thing they can do is remove your CFP designation if you don't follow their rules of certain ethical requirements and certain continuing education requirements. And so if there's a bad actor with a CFP and the CFP board finds out, they can remove the CFP designation, but there's nothing punitive towards that bad actor, whereas state regulators can actually fine and enforce laws that could either fine that person, penalize them, or even lead to potentially jail time. So like if someone defrauds, if a bad advisor defrauds people, it'd be a small Bernie Madoff kind of thing, where like Bernie Madoff was large enough to be SEC regulated. He's now in jail, and the CFP board can't send someone to jail, whereas the state regulators can.
Yeah, all I'm saying is the state regulators could have said, if you don't satisfy your CE requirement, either by the 12 hours or the CFP, you go to jail, right? They didn't need to require you to do the 12 hours on top of the CFP if you're already doing it. They could have modeled the legislation so that they're not double counting. And what I'm saying is that's just one small example of adding bureaucracy that doesn't add value.
I agree.
The sheer fact that you have 50 different slightly similar, slightly different sets of regulatory policies across the country is just another example of unnecessary regulatory burden, in my opinion.
But that's the United States. Like that's like the history of the United States. Each state has different tax laws because that's what each state wants to do. Like, and that's actually foundational to the United States of have the federal government of the state's power. Like that's just the way our country is.
Well, no, there's certain things we've designated would be more sensible to handle at the federal level, certain things at the state level. Some things got grandfathered in for bureaucracy reasons, right? For example, this was before the internet, right? That's why they said, oh, yeah, of course. Why would an advisor have clients in 7 different states across the country? There's no such thing as an internet. I would not make a rule that would pretend there's going to be an internet. Let's keep things regulated at the state level where people are using faxes and, horse and carriages to meet with their advisor, right? But no, things have changed, but we still have this 50 state system.
Which gets back to my reason. I think Supreme Court justice will still be a job in my lifetime. I think the government is just generations slower.
Yeah. So, but my point back to your question though is, I could see how a client can get value from a CFP who doesn't have a bachelor's degree, just as much value, and I can
Wait.
see what.
Okay, sorry. Go.
What?
My counter is a big part of the CFP is the education requirement
Yeah.
to actually show that. And yes, we could say like the CFP might be the financial services equivalent of like a coding boot camp for engineers.
Yeah.
I think that you're a better engineer because you have a computer science degree than if you just learn basic coding. I think that financial advisors are better when they have the bachelor's and the CFP education requirements beyond just can you read a book and pass a test.
Actually, let me take back what I even said. The CFP isn't even the government, right? We even said it's a
Correct.
non-government organization,
Yeah.
so they can do whatever they want. Right? So, restate your question again, because I want to make sure I answer the
You
right
think it's
question.
appropriate
Yep.
or fair
Yep.
that to have a CFP,
Yep.
you have to have a bachelor's degree?
This is hard to say. I'd say I don't mind either way, to be honest. If the CFP wants to change its rules, okay. Like,
I think that part of what the CFP itself does is gives a signal to consumers who can't judge advisors from each other of at the very least, this advisor has a college degree and has gone through education requirements and has these continuing education requirements.
Right.
That like they're in good standing by this self-regulatory body.
Yeah.
And there's value in that where the CFP has done the research and selection process.
Yeah.
And given you a very clear signal of one part of, is this an advisor worth hiring?
Yeah. This is a little tricky for me because if you had said, can a state regulator require a bachelor? I'd say no. I would say that's not necessary to be an advisor. This is not a government entity. So here I'd say I'm a little ambivalent. That'd be my more response. Meaning if they want to change it, okay, it might dilute, right, the value of the CFP because you have less checkboxes. However, the reason I'm hedging a bit is I'm still of the position that I'm not sure how much value a bachelor's degree is going to be worth at 8 years compared to today.
Okay. Similar with lawyer. I don't, again, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm guessing here. But I don't think you need a JD to practice law. You do have to pass the bar exam to practice law in a state.
Let me, we can fact check.
Which again is it's a government regulatory exam, but it's the bar for becoming an advisor at the state or SEC regulatory level is kind of so low that the CFP has value. Whereas the bar of being a lawyer does have it's a higher bar at the regulatory level.
Yeah.
That it's kind of like, if you can pass the bar exam without a bachelor's degree and a JD and going to law school, that's already really impressive. But your bachelor's and your JD, I'm assuming bachelor's is a prerequisite for a JD.
Yeah.
Like most people do that because that genuinely helps you pass the bar exam.
Okay, a few things. I'm actually a big fan of non-government self-regulated organizations. A much bigger fan than the government regulating things. Because I think they'll be able to adapt more quickly to changing environments.
I think so too. I agree with that.
And my point is, if the CFP realizes 8 years from now that having a bachelor is detracting value from the designation, and they choose to make it not a requirement for those reasons and they're able to substantiate it, I'd be on board with it, right? If there was a strong reason, we don't know 8 years from now, but there could be a reason that it makes sense. For example, I've mentioned this before. Google, even before AI, had this online set of courses that if you took it and passed their exams and you did well, they didn't care if you had a degree. They would hire you as a programmer.
I agree.
I can imagine similar things showing up in every other field. And if you're able to obtain this level of accreditation that's not locked by a bachelor's degree type of organization, but still provides just as much educational value, and the CFP is able to recognize that, then sure.
Okay, so I agree, but your logic made a weird skip.
Okay.
We went back to like, I agree. Google has done the examination process through their courses.
Yeah.
But if you pass those courses, you're even if it works, you're an employee of Google.
Yeah.
Which we said at the beginning, we don't want you to be an employee, we want you to be a business owner. It's like, how do you found Google? How do you create a company that can create its own examination processes? And again, I acknowledge you probably don't need a bachelor's degree for that, but the founders of Google have computer science degrees, and like they create a product so amazing that they're able to build a company.
Wait, let's slow down. Do they have? Because
I agree that they probably didn't finish. I agree they probably didn't finish. Okay.
Gates didn't finish, right?
But they met in college.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying they showed up and said, "Screw this." Right?
Correct. But it's like,
I don't know if that bolsters the case for.
Oh, man, okay. I agree. I think Gates didn't finish. I don't think the Google founders finished. I'll acknowledge that. Okay. So, but they both went.
I think they all realize entrepreneurship in college don't make sense. Like Zuckerberg, Gates, the
but
Google
they
people
all went.
Well, yeah. Well, okay. So, but I don't think it was the college that helped them to quit because it was so great that they thought.
You don't think? You think they would have created those companies if they hadn't gone to college?
Here's an interesting insight into that question. There was a study that showed students who got into Ivy League schools and decided to go, right? And students that got into Ivy League schools that didn't decide to go to those Ivy League schools.
I've seen this. I've used that with other examples. That idea of long-term success of like Harvard grads or not. It's like, did you apply?
Right.
Which implies, do you think you're good enough to get into Harvard?
Right. Did you meet the criteria? Not did you actually go?
No. I don't think it's. So again, this is my interpretation of that study. It's not the meet the criteria part, although that is part of it. It's that internal drive of, I think I'm good enough to go to Harvard.
Well,
I genuinely personally believe that. Like, it's that grit part. It's like, I have built up enough skills. I have the drive. I have the ambition. I can go to Harvard. That you're going to succeed in life no matter what.
Well, I don't know if that's sufficient because a huge percentage of people think they're good enough to Harvard, but they don't get in.
But do they actually apply?
Yeah, that's what I mean. The acceptance rate is so low for that reason.
Correct.
Right.
But I think that the majority of the population would not even bother applying to Harvard. I think that so again, I happen to know UCLA has more applications than any other school in the country.
Yeah.
UCLA has more applications than Harvard, even though by every objective rankings, Harvard is considered a better university than UCLA. Because you get this like confluence of, it's the public school in the nation's most populous state. So it's for California residents, it's really cheap. It's a high enough academic school that can be a safety school for those also applying to Harvard. And it's a dream school for those who are applying to lots of other lower level public schools, and they think they get in, and also because the University of California system has one application for all their schools. It makes sense for almost every California resident to just check the box for UCLA.
I don't know if that helps your case.
I think it does, but but that's not the point. It's like it's the people don't apply to Harvard because they don't think they can get in, or maybe they don't think they can afford it.
Yeah,
it's people who think they can get in, that's willing to pay the application fee.
Yeah,
and if they can't afford the application fee, they can get waivers for that, but they still think they're good enough to get in. No, I don't think that there's a large subset of the population who is applying to Harvard just on a whim, just hopefully. Yeah, maybe I'll take a shot.
I would say my interpretation of those results is a little bit different. The way I've always interpreted that study is the outcomes ended up being the same, regardless of if you got in and went versus if you got in and you didn't go. And the way I took those results is, well, it's not Harvard that made them great.
I agree.
It's the fact that they were able to meet the qualifications to get into Harvard, meaning they were able to get accepted. Not only did they apply, but they were in that small subset of the people that applied and also got in.
I agree, but do you think, how many people do you think got into Harvard, didn't go to college at all? They didn't go to any college? Or do you think that 90, 95+% of the people who applied to Harvard and got in also got into other colleges and went to those other colleges instead?
Well, okay, so let me make my case, and then I'll address that. So the case I'm making is, I don't think there was anything magic at Harvard or these Ivy League schools specifically that led to greater outcomes.
Not at the specific school level, I agree.
Okay, so I think it's going to be hard to answer that, and it's going to be even harder to answer my follow-up, because I think the status quo for the previous generation was go to college, right? Okay. We have a regression chart that says if you go to college, you'll earn more. Go to college.
That's fair. I'll grant that.
So it was just ingrained, right? For it was basically taken for granted, essentially.
I will acknowledge that, yes.
And what we're trying to say is 8 years from now, will that still be the status quo? Will it be just as valuable? And I guess what I was pushing back with the CFP notion is, if there is a Google-like product that can educate an individual to be just as qualified of a CFP, and the CFP board acknowledges that, in lieu of getting a bachelor's, I think that would be something important for the CFP to take into consideration. And I think that would be true for any field. You know, and to answer your question about the JD, you do need a JD in most states, but there are a few exceptions, like California and Vermont, Virginia, Washington. So here's, again, where I leave it. I think there should be a stronger emphasis on having these self-regulatory organizations be able to provide value that's able to adjust with the times. Meaning, if for whatever options are out there to qualify somebody for this particular qualification are met, then, and somebody meets those criteria, whatever it happens to be, then great, it's doing its job. Right. But if it's things that are there just for the sake of being there because they've been there in the last generation, I don't think that's enough of a checkbox, you know, or of a requirement.
So I want to kind of wrap up, because we didn't answer any of the questions that I had. So I might force
I don't think we even got to the topic.
I remember my senior year. I was kind of worried about looking at jobs. Senior of college, I was looking at jobs, and an adult who had graduated, still worked at UCLA, was gave me the quote, like, your undergrad teaches you how to learn. Grad school is where you actually learn how to do a job. And it stuck with me of like, I was able to pass the Series 7 pretty quickly after college. Like, I actually felt confident in my study skills to be able to pass the Series 7 and California State Insurance license like within a few months of graduating.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I started out of Ameriprise. And I wonder, this is more like question, like I'm not confident, but the value of going to college is being able to pass the bar exam. Like I don't know how many high school students would be able to pass the CFP exam, like to have like the drive and study skills, like because there is a level of technical knowledge to pass the CFP that you need to display that. So whether it's coming from a regulatory body, government regulatory body, or a self-regulatory organization, I agree. I don't necessarily care, but that there is some kind of display of knowledge and ability to get into that matters to me. And being able to reach those bars, a bachelor's degree, I genuinely believe helps with that, but it is not required. It's similar, like, do you think OpenAI is hiring engineers who don't have computer science degrees? Like the people building the AI, and it becomes I don't know if OpenAI is large enough, like Google, to build in their own examination requirements. They're trusting the bachelor's degree process as a selection process of, yes, they've reached a certain bar of competence. And that idea of how again, like, now we got back to employers. These are not business owners, which we want to be more people self-employed. But I do think there's still a higher level skill of services offered. And I think that's what I want to try and, like, you mentioned a long time ago, like the window washer business,
mm-hmm.
where it's you own the business and you hire other window washers. And we just want to make sure that we're on the business owner side, not the window washer side, because that's theoretically an unskilled or very trainable job. And most likely to start that business, you have to start off washing your own windows, and then you build up enough marketing or skill of getting people to hire your company to wash windows, and you have enough clients, and you now hire employees. Like all the business skills related, I think those are very valuable. I totally agree with that. But I'm gonna guess that the margins on your window washer business are pretty low, and I think that if you want to have a more valuable business, you need a higher level skill. You either need a product that doesn't exist, so you need the technical skills to invent it, or a service that people will pay more for. I think that's what I want my kids to get to, is higher aspirations of the good or service, not baseline business owner.
It is going to be tough because I know we're hearing the end of the hour. I don't know if we need a part 2 or something.
We definitely got a part 2. Like, because I'm going to force you to answer my question, given my premise. Like, you just said an hour, like disagree with the premise.
You're gonna force me to answer? Okay.
Next meeting or next
conversation.
Next meeting.
Okay, good. So let me end with something just high level, and maybe this can also help set us up. I think the purpose of education will likely shift, and probably needs to shift, from learning knowledge to learning how to learn. And I think the main purpose of education should be, how do I pick up skills that I want to know, so that I can better my personal position? And I think the way that we've gone about it historically has been pretty rudimentary. I think many people learn and acquire information and knowledge through many different modalities in many different ways, and each has their own ways that they end up having a sweet spot. And I think the traditional education system targets towards like the center of the mean, right? And kind of hopes that people fall into that.
Okay.
And I think individuals learn the best when they're motivated to learn, but also the information that they're learning is right in their sweet spot of not too difficult, but not too easy, right? So it's continually pushing them forward. And I think if somebody is able to have a learning path that's aligned with that, not when they reach college finally, but all the way from when they're a little kid, all the way up until whenever they need not to use that knowledge, then I think the outcomes will be far better. And
okay, I inherently agree with that sentiment.
Yeah.
I think my question, and we'll talk about next time, is what areas of like what areas of interest would you recommend?
Yeah.
Your second grader doesn't know the difference between biology, chemistry, and physics.
Mm-hmm.
She might know science versus art.
Well, yeah.
But she's probably but again, it's like, what's an area that you recommend? Well, we'll talk about the next time. But okay. So way too long. You never answered my question, and I'm not angry. Maybe a little angry. I'm so worried this is
we need like a non-time box conversation where we can really let's sit down one Sunday and record, and then we'll get the whole year done.
Oh man, that's an interesting idea. Right? That, I don't know of any like podcast episodes. It'd be like a True Detective serial like narrative podcast, but that's
fine. Let's complete a whole something.
Whole something. There we go.
An entire Socratic discussion, right? Until finally we agree on everything.
Oh no, I don't think we do that. In
one topic.
One topic. Okay.
One predefined topic. How's that?
We're like 150 hours plus 150 something hours in, and we still don't agree on college.
But I'm game. So
okay.
Let's think about that. That.
Maybe we'll meet in person for the first time.
Sure.
Okay, I genuinely love the conversation, Trishul. Thank you very much. I'm gonna push you harder next time.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I always do. I enjoy this conversation. And thanks everybody for listening and watching. Bye.
Okay. Bye. We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of the Mind Money Spectrum podcast. Be sure to visit mindmoneyspectrum.com to access the entire library of episodes. Remember, it's not black and white, but the wide spectrum of gray area where you get to pursue the freedoms you want in life. Opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. Have a nice day.